All right, so today is January 30, 2020. Today we're going to go over the 1.18 planning spreadsheet to get a status update for what folks are working on. We recently had the feature freeze deadline for 1.18, so we want to keep track of what items made it and what items did not. If there are any PRs that you want to discuss, any designs you want to review, please feel free to add them to the agenda, and then we'll go over the miscellaneous items. And if there's anything else you want to talk about, feel free to go ahead and add them to the agenda doc. So jumping straight into the spreadsheet, we're going to start from the top. We have CSI Onlineoffline resizing, volume expansion, fix issues. Hamant, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so there are two PRs in flight for bringing the CSI latest changes. There's another PR that does not require any cap, which is about calling read write node expand on all nodes where read volume is mounted as read write. I'll make a fix for it. And there was a third issue about the recovering from resize, which, as you like, those who have been keeping track, I opened the enhancement pull request, but it did not get merged in time for an enhancement. So I think we're gonna miss it. The reason it took so much time for me is because it took time for me to realize that like truly fixing the issue of like shrinking the volume and keeping the PVC size in 3 places is almost impossible to fix. We don't know the true size of the volume actually. The create volume RPC call itself, the size is optional, and the volume response capacity is optional. So when a volume is created, we don't know the size of it, the true size of it. We only know that what user requested. The other problem is is that node expand volume has the capacity, like input capacity as optional and output capacity as optional. So setting the values coming from these RPC calls in PVC status at capacity could lead to situations where the like the plugin reports FS size, which is smaller than the user requested size. It will lead into like resize loop where it will keep trying to expand, and there's like other race conditions. So yeah, so I proposed a PR that kind of not 100% fixes it, but allows the user to recover from the resize failure and try resizing with a lower size at the cost of that the quota will remain to the highest value. So if you expanded the volume from 10 to 100 GB, that failed because out of capacity, your storage provider out of capacity or something, and then you tried with 100 to 20 and that succeeded, but your quota will still be calculated 20. So that's what my PR fixes it. And I think I reviewed with Ben, Michelle, Jan, David was reviewing it, but it's a bit complex to.
Yeah, I think that's a good one to run by the larger SIG. So maybe if we have time at the end of the meeting today, we can talk about it more.
Cool.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your work on this one. Next item, we're going to skip over. Then we have support containerized CSI node plugin in Windows with storage proxy. Deep, are you on the line by any chance? KK, are you able to give an update on their behalf? Thank you.
So around yesterday late night, I was able to get the Azure disk working for the first time with everything end-to-end integrated. There are PRs required into node registrar. There are a few PRs required into the kubelet CSI code. Basically around path translations for Windows is the main theme of these changes. Other than that, it's more like we have to unroll some of these workarounds, make sure that CSI proxy has all these fixes which has been added to make it work, and then we'll have a stable thing. So potentially we can have a demo maybe in the next meeting. Things working.
Awesome. That's really great progress. Thank you. All right, thank you, KK. Next item is Snapshot, fixing issues from the beta release. Xing or Sean, you want to give an update?
Yeah, so there was a bug related to Go modules, so that got fixed. We had to cut a 2.0.1, and then we are still working on documentation and tests.
Cool. All right, thank you, Xing. Next item is non-recursive volume ownership, FS Group. I believe I saw the KEP for this get merged. Hamad?
Yeah, the KEP would merged, and I think I'll work on the implementation. It should not be too difficult.
Okay, cool. And then we should probably switch you here as the primary. Okay, next item is SE Linux recursive permission handling. Hamad, do you want to talk about that one?
Jan is there.
Jan?
Hello, I just joined. I don't have a cap, so it's going to slip from 118, and I would like to have at least design in 118.
Okay. So we'll pay. Okay, so we'll change the target to design. All right, cool. Next item is file permission handling for Windows. Anyone know if there's any updates there? Okay, we're going to call that no update. Next item is CSI entry read-only, and I don't see Chris on the line either, and I have not seen any updates on this. So we're going to mark that as no update. Next item is CSI Driver skip attach pod info to GA. Christian or Jan, any updates on that?
I think this is Heyman. Sorry, the KEP was the KEP was already merged, but we got it's being tracked. There's a PR open already for moving these features. It missed 117, so we just have to get this done in 118. There might be some E2 test I was hoping we could add, and yeah, we should be good.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Hamad. Next item is improving CSI metrics. That was already completed. Next item is issues related to assuming volumes are mount points. And this was a bug fix that I believe we were looking for an owner for. I think last status was Jing may have started to work on this. Michelle, do you have any more on this? Okay, we're gonna go ahead and mark that as no. All right, next item is volume snapshot namespace transfer. There was no KEP that made it for this one.
Yeah, I have no updates for this, but I plan to. I've made time for it next week.
Okay, and who is speaking? Sorry.
This is Mike Henriksen.
Mike. Okay, perfect. All right, thank you, Mike. Next item is CSI volume health. Xing, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so the CAP got merged. it is a trimmed down version, so it's smaller than what we have planned for, but it has like 2/3 of what we wanted because it has the controller and the agent part, and also CSI changes are in there. API changes are removed for now, so we'll just be doing events reporting for now. Next is to submit a issue and PR in CSI spec and discuss this in the CSI community meeting.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for all your work on that, Xing.
Thanks.
Next item is the volume groups API, which the primary driver for this was actually capacity. And do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so I did put together something. I can submit it soon. But right now, I think the scope is pretty wide because we are using this for the capacity spreading and also for snapshots. So I think I'd like to have some high-level discussion first and then decide whether we want to narrow it down, but otherwise it will be just too much.
Right.
I also think since we have the storage pool cap, we may not really need to use this volume group for that. So we can discuss about that during the cap review.
And speaking of the storage pool cap, I'm going to actually swap these because this one has a little bit more traction. So Patrick had a cap out for this. Is Patrick on the line by any chance? No. So this cap did not make it. The feedback was around basically how Kubernetes would be able to do capacity calculations in the scheduler with the information that was being proposed. And there were a bunch of edge cases, and instead of trying to hack something together, the feedback that we got was, let's come up with something more robust, maybe look into a reservation type system. And so we're going to go back and look at that for the remainder of this quarter. So instead of trying to deliver an alpha this quarter, we're going to switch this to design for the quarter. And hopefully come up with something that everyone can agree on. And next item is generic populator data source. Ben, you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, so I I wrote up the cap, and we started to go into a rat hole around exactly how the data populator should work. So we scaled back the cap to just focusing on an alpha feature gate to open up the data source field, so to any object, and that cap was merged. So the plan is we'll implement that feature and then use the next quarter to try out various ways of doing data population and see if we can find one that everybody likes.
Okay. I think that'll be the big contentious thing that'll keep us from moving this to beta, is figuring out a design for data populators that everyone agrees on and makes sense, and the API makes sense. Is there a, what is this column, enhancement issue for this, Ben?
Yeah, I can dig it up and add it to the spreadsheet.
Okay. And I'll go ahead and mark this as alpha. And throw in the cap in there too.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I'll get all the links fixed.
Next up, we have the CSI drivers. So the CSI drivers, initially we were planning on just removing these because we didn't have any owners for them. Michelle had folks reach out to her offering to help pick up the drivers and drive them, actually start implementing them. So the new plan is to keep them and get them into a better state. Michelle, I see you're here, but I don't know if your mic is working. And instead of deprecating, we'll try and improve.
Hello.
Hey, there you are.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I think some people reached out to me regarding NFS and iSCSI. So I think we have enough traction to at least continue those two drivers. I had one person reach out to me regarding fiber channel, but I would really like at least one more person to help with fiber channel. And then no one has reached out to me regarding Flex.
About the regular Flex volume, there's no plan to deprecate, right?
No, not the regular entry Flex. We have no plans to deprecate. That is correct.
Well,
Okay.
so there's one notice that Chang sent out a couple months ago where the Kubernetes, I forgot which SIG is doing it, but maybe security SIG, but they're looking at rebasing all of the controller binaries to use distroless. And what that means is that the controller manager can no longer shell out to things. So that's going to break the controller part of Flex drivers. So I think that part, that functionality of Flex may get deprecated.
Why can't we use distroless and just add a shell?
Security?
Oh, so they specifically don't want to add a shell.
Yeah.
But the Flex API itself isn't going anywhere, and
Yeah, but I think basically that controller part of the Flex functionality is gonna have
right.
to be deprecated and removed.
Yeah, and so if you're interested in that, go look at the messages that Chang has been sending out to Kubernetes SIG, and please reply to those if you have any concerns. Next item is the deprecation of the Kubernetes Incubator external storage repo. We have this assigned currently to Matt Wong. There is an issue I created for this in Kubernetes org.
Should we also send out an email to Kubernetes dev?
I believe there was an email already sent out. We can double check. Boop, boop, boop. And who's the target? I'll go back and look at this and see if it was just Kubernetes SIG storage or also. Oh yeah, I sent it to dev as well. Dev and users. And it looks like Matt has been making some progress on this. Anyway, we'll have to follow up with him offline. Next item is Roblox to GA. Any updates on this, Jan?
Yes, the cap rate was merged and it's on track for 118.
Cool, thank you, Jan. Next item is CSI Migration next steps. Deep, Chang, David, anybody want to give an update on this? KK, do you happen to have an update on this?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay, no worries. We'll just
Yeah. So I think David opened up enhancement issues for all of the cloud providers. As far as I know, it doesn't look like any of the cloud providers are planning to graduate anything in this release.
So there was one thing which had come up, that is, if it becomes that CSI migration is by default, we will end up in a situation where the CSI drivers should all be ready too. So in case of Azure, we have this trouble that Windows CSI driver is not going to be ready until 1.18.
Yeah, so I think I clarified that actually, so we moved AWS and GCE to beta, but it's actually off by default. So I think if, like, we could say, you know, at least the Linux implementation would be beta, and if people don't use Windows, they can still, you know, try it out.
Okay. So I agree with, I mean, this is something which I was requesting Andy whether same thing can happen. So I'll just work it out with him. Thanks, Michelle.
All right, thanks, Michelle. Thanks, KK. Next item is Open Storage API. Jeff, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, object storage API. So there's been no change to the KEP. We were waiting till we had a prototype up so that we had some experience, first-hand experience using CSI. Previously, the KEP currently talks about a library similar to the external storage provisioner library, and the feedback we got was that a CSI approach would be better. So John Cope on our team wrote up a CSI-like provisioner for a simple S3 provisioning a bucket and the interfaces following the CSI approach. And we have that working right now. And we were then ready to schedule a community meeting to discuss the KEP, but learned that Andrew at Google has something also written that is very similar, it sounds like, which we haven't seen. So Saad and I were going to try to talk about when we could meet, what we do next. Saad, I don't really even know, because I'm not sure it makes sense to review our KEP if you guys are about to open something, but I didn't see a KEP for yours. I don't know if what you guys are doing would be an implementation of the high level concepts of the KEP, or it's different. So we're kind of in limbo right now.
Yeah, I think the end goals for Andrew are the same. Let's just set up a meeting to talk through kind of what the API he has proposed versus the one that you have proposed, and figure out what the overlap is and what the differences are. And I'm going to guess the differences are probably relatively minor because the end goal is identical. And then it's just a matter of merging the two proposals into a single proposal and moving that forward. So let's set up a meeting.
That's
Andrew,
fine.
and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you so much for helping drive this.
Sure thing.
All right, moving on. Next item is, these are items that ideally are owned by our sister SIG apps. First one is volume expansion for stateful sets. And I believe we were looking for an owner there. KK, any updates on this one?
Yeah, I attended SIGAP's meeting, and Ken from SIGAP's said he will look at the KEP and review it from a SIGAP side. I pinged the owner of the KEP in GitHub. There has not been any response. So we need to figure out what the next step is.
Okay, so we may need to find someone else to take over
So what's the most respectful way to take over? Do we open a new cap and refer the author there? And how does the process?
Yeah, and it's a good question. Like we don't want to, make anybody upset.
Yep.
I would say I think you're doing the right thing by reaching out on Slack. Maybe the next steps would be posting some comments on the CAP itself.
Yes. So I reached back on Slack a while back. I posted on GitHub last week,
Okay.
but there has not been responses.
Okay. So if there's no response, then what we can do is have a new owner open up a new CAP.
Okay.
And then point a reference from this one to the new one to say, hey, since this one hasn't had any activity, we forked it, and we're going to continue work on it there. Cool. And if the owner of the original one ever comes back into the fold, they're welcome to help continue to drive it.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you. Next item is address issues where PVC are not deleted when the stateful set is deleted. We had Dave Smith owning this from the SIG app side. Does anybody have a status update on this? Maybe Xing?
Yeah, so he's still looking into this. I saw he added some comments in that issue saying that he needs to put together some cap because there are different opinions on how to solve it.
Okay.
So effectively, he attended the SIG apps meeting and presented, the thing.
Okay.
So the feedback came from there to, like you just said, we need to go with the cap and decide on the approaches.
Cool. That's great progress. Thank you. And the next item is execution hook for application snapshots.
Yeah, this one is getting complicated.
Okay.
So Ashish has done a lot of work. He has two PRs. One is the API change, the other is controller change. So I've been reviewing the API changes. Actually, he's done that. He implemented that based on the merged cap. And then Tim reviewed the code, and then Tim has some comments, which basically will go a totally different direction. So, well, actually, well, well, what he said is reasonable, but we actually already gone through those during the previous cap review. We actually had many meetings when we were designing this. There were mainly like two directions, right? The first one was actually what we proposed in the initial cap, was to add this hook in the lifecycle struct inside the container. And then the second option is to do this CRD thing, have external controller. So those are like two main directions, but there are variations of each. We had a lot of discussions at that time, eventually decided to go with the CRD. And then we actually said that we actually have that written in the cap saying that, okay, we're going to do alpha implementation based on this main proposal in the cap. But then before moving from alpha to beta, we're going to evaluate and look at moving this into kubelet. The team was saying, if you will have to make all this change before you move to beta, then you should just do it now. So, so we need to decide what is the high level, what is the direction, right? It's a totally different direction. If we go with this kubelet, this direction, then that means we don't really even need this execution hook repo. We shouldn't even create this repo in the first place. So
okay.
That's the status.
Sounds like we're back at the design phase.
Yeah.
What would be the best way to help resolve this?
Okay, so should we have a meeting with the team? And because that's what, since we already wrote that in the merge cap, we said that we're doing this in alpha in this way, and then before moving from alpha to beta, we're looking at, so.
I think that might be the best way to start moving this forward.
Okay.
So let me make sure we update the status here. We're going to change this to design for the quarter. And hopefully we can come up with a design this quarter that everyone agrees on. All right, thank you.
And also this was initially tracked for 1.18, but then because the merge cap does not have test plan, so they removed it. I just submitted the cap as a PR to add the test plan, but probably no rush for that, I guess.
Right, because
Yeah.
the cap didn't get, well, I guess the cap is here, but yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Thank you, Xing. And sorry for all the back and forth. I think the interesting thing now is that I think all the low-hanging fruit for this SIG is has been picked, and all the problems that we have are the big, thorny, difficult ones. And so there's always multiple ways of doing it, and so these are going to be the hard ones that'll take time to get in. All right, moving back to the agenda. Looks like there's no PRs or design reviews. Next item is I wanted to talk about the co-chair for this SIG. As you all know, Brad passed away late last year, and we need to kind of fill his position. We went through and removed Brad from a lot of approver and owners files a few weeks ago. And now we need to figure out what the next step is. And I think what I would like to propose is similar to what other SIGs are doing, where instead of having 2 co-chairs, we do co-chairs plus tech leads. And the co-chairs would be responsible for administrivia, so running meetings and that kind of thing. And the tech leads can help guide the technical discussion for the SIG. And so if you're interested in either of those positions, please reach out to me, and we'll get that process going. Feel free to send me an email or ping me on Slack. I think email would probably be the best way to get through to me. And if you have any questions about that, let me know. We can talk about it here, or if you want to talk about it in private, we can certainly do that as well.
Hey, Saad, just a quick question. How many tech leads are you looking for? I mean, are they going to be kind of broken into technical categories within the SIG, or just?
That's a good question. I think for now, I was just looking for 2 general tech leads.
Okay.
We can start small and then expand as needed.
Thanks.
Cool. Next item. Oh, any other questions on that? Okay, so moving on. Next item is KubeCon EU. Is coming up very quickly at the end of March, beginning of April. And the question is, are there any SIG storage related activities there? So there are a number of storage related talks, of course, and we have a SIG storage intro session that has been approved. Beyond that, I am not aware of any additional activities. If anybody is interested in organizing something, let me know and let the SIG know, and we can get something going.
We also have the data protection group session.
Oh, cool. Is that a talk, or is it a?
It's, yeah.
Okay. Anything else anybody's aware of at KubeCon related to this SIG? All right, so I think that is it. And if plans change, if you're planning anything for a KubeCon, just let the SIG know and we'll keep track of it here. I think that's all I had on KubeCon. Anything else anybody wanted to talk about today?
Were we going to go into more detail on the resize stuff?
That's a good point. I almost forgot about that. I think that's a good idea. Let's do that right now. So, do you want to start that discussion?
Did we lose him?
Let's take a look.
He's not here.
Yeah, he might have dropped off.
I guess main question that I wanted to raise about that was like, okay, so if the KEP isn't merged, we can't make the API change we wanted to on the Kubernetes side, but there's still a bunch of CSI related work.
Most of the CSI plugins have not implemented the return size for volumes or for the expand calls correctly. Part of the challenge we're facing. And I want to see if we can like somehow move, either like try to fix all the plugins we know about and potentially more CSI spec changes to actually like more clarify the return values and potentially make it required in that kind of thing.
Well, okay. Yeah, I guess I find that interesting. Is it the case that you can implement the spec properly and it still doesn't work?
So yeah, there's two problems. One is that pretty much are not implementing it correctly, and also because of that, Kubernetes is not using the value properly, right? So it's like it's sort of a chicken and egg problem, I guess. Like in order to fix it, I think we need to start fixing both.
If plugins aren't conforming to the spec, then we know who to hammer on to fix that. But if the spec itself doesn't give us what we need, then
yeah, it's also both, right? The other problem is so there's like plugins are not implementing it conforming to the spec, and the second problem is the spec itself is not adequate.
all right. Yeah. So there's nothing stopping us from solving both of those problems in this quarter, right?
Correct.
And is there anything else that we need to do other than the Kubernetes API change that Hemant had proposed? It's just the three things: the CSI spec changes, fixing the drivers, and improving the API.
I'm wondering if we can somehow fix the drivers and fix the CSI spec, then maybe the actual KEP could be maybe different. Like maybe we could solve the quota problem too.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I will point out one thing that came out of the discussion I had with him on I guess it was Tuesday. I hadn't realized what problem I was trying to solve a different problem than he was, which is why I was interested in this. And it turns out that my problem was the wrong problem and that he was solving the right problem. But his solution doesn't actually solve the problem; it just makes it less bad. So the basic problem is if you intend to resize the volume by a little bit and you accidentally resize it by a lot, you end up getting stuck in this state where your volume is huge and you can't reduce its size. And Hemant had a proposal to allow you to resize it to a smaller size if the resize actually failed, but the quota would never go back down. So if you resize it to a ridiculously large size, your quota would be that huge size forever. And the way you actually get out of that situation, if you end up in it and you don't want to be in that situation, is you have to change the PV to retain, then delete the PVC and make a new PVC of the correct size, and then to the PV. And that's how you would get out of the, my PVC is way larger than it should be situation. So as long as you have that escape hatch to address accidental resizes to the wrong size, I don't know if it's super valuable to have all the other stuff, because that was the problem that I was most worried about. Is I meant to resize it to 100 gigabytes. I accidentally resized it to 100 terabytes, and that failed because I don't have 100 terabytes. And and then what do I do? So as long as there's a solution to that problem, and there is already, I guess I'm less worried about the rest of it.
Yeah, I think my concern is just even with the new proposal, there is not a good, clean solution for the quota issue. So I think it solves part of the problem, like you said. So a user that hits this can fix their own volume and get their volume into a good state. But the problem is that the quota for that user, for that namespace, is still screwed.
Yes,
requires-
but you can do the thing where you delete the PVC and rebind it to a new smaller PVC.
right. So lots of painful manual work to try and go fix
Yeah.
this. So if ideally we could come up with some way to do this the right way where we don't impact quota, that would be super awesome. And now that we have time, I think it might be worth walking through other solutions to see what crazy ideas we can come up with to solve this.
Maybe if we automate the manual process of deleting the larger PVC and replacing it with the smaller PVC.
Yeah, but
just
I still see that
rebinding.
as like addressing the symptoms, not the root cause. I think the root cause goes back to what Michelle is saying, which is, you know, the drivers are returning the wrong thing. The CSI spec doesn't really require them to return anything at all of which combine to make it impossible for Kubernetes to ever know what the true capacity of a volume is.
Yeah, but I think that all of those issues are tangential to the quota issue, because the quota is always going to be what the quota is never related to how big the volume actually is. The quota is always related to how big you wanted the volume to be, because you can ask for a 1 gig volume and the system can give you a 10 gig volume, and that's legal. But you don't get charged 10 gigs quota for that. You get charged 1 gig because that's what you asked for. So tying the quota to the actual size would introduce all kinds of new problems.
That's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of that.
Like I think that it's nice to know the actual size of the volume, sure, but that doesn't get us closer to addressing the quota problem, which is just that the Kubernetes quota system doesn't deal well with trying to like modify the quota of an existing object. It wants to set it at creation time and then only increase it.
Yeah, I think the only benefit of having the real capacity of a volume would be that
you can reconcile, like in
right.
the case where you accidentally bumped it up and then you decrease it back, then instead of keeping that accidental too big of a value, you can actually like reconcile and be like, hey, I shrunk it back and the actual volume size is the size of the lower one, so I can actually reduce the quota again.
And if,
yeah, but what are you going to do about the situations when the system gave you a larger volume than you asked for, just because
so
of
I
the
mean,
way it
in
was
that case,
implemented?
I think Kubernetes is still the arbitrator of the quota, right? So if it has both signals, the actual value and the requested value, it can figure out which one to use as needed. So for calculating the quota, it could use the requested. And then for reconciling what happened, it can use the actual. And so the race between if somebody quickly sets to a very high value and then a slightly, lower but also high value, Kubernetes can figure out which one of those operations actually succeeded by looking at the real value of the volume after some time.
Yeah, but which one would you use for the quota? The bigger or the smaller one?
So that is a good question. I guess at that point we'd have to like map it to whatever the closest large value was.
Yeah, so I think Haman's proposal actually has 2 fields in it. There's like the current, or we
had an allocated capacity field, and it was like a one-way ratchet that only gets larger. And that's fine, because it prevents all the malicious use cases of where a malicious user attempts to steal more space without getting charged the quota for it. But you do have this other problem where sometimes the system just gives you more space than you ask for, and that's not your fault. And
complicates things.
Yeah.
So what if we let the system, in addition to returning the true value of the volume, also return a value which is what should the quota be, like how much quota should be charged? And so then you let the storage system decide whether that is equal to the real value of the storage, or it could be equal to the requested storage. Or
like I think that's what Haman's proposal is trying to do. It's trying to add a new field, which is like the current requested size. I think the question is how currently we don't allow that number to ever shrink.
Right.
Right.
So,
So
could
if
there be some situation where we do allow it to shrink?
that was what I tried to get out of him, and he said any attempt to do that is going to cause API races that are unresolvable, and that's why he said it can't ever shrink, because like the quota system just doesn't like that. and that's why I think maybe the better answer is like just get a whole new PVC in there and delete the old one, because the quota system will tolerate that.
But I mean, if we're going to do that, do we even need this shrinking cap at all?
That's what I was trying to say, is maybe the real answer is just automate this clunky solution of swapping in a new PVC and making that really easy to do.
Because we're going to need that for other problems as well.
Potentially.
Interesting.
I also felt nervous about the proposal to add a new field to the PVC API, because once we add that field, you can never remove it, right? That's automatically GA when you add it. It doesn't go through alpha, beta. And so.
Oh no, the new field does have to go through alpha, beta.
Oh, is that, even though it's on a core object?
Yes, there's a process for that. There's actually like an alpha field.
That makes me feel better, because I was afraid we were going to add a new field and then be stuck with it if we changed our minds. Okay, well, we can, when Hemant is back on the call, we can have more discussions about what we really want to do here. But yeah,
I think we have a few options. None of them are great. We'll need to talk through this, and yeah, we can continue this discussion later. Any other comments, concerns about this, or anything anybody wants to talk about? Okay, and you get 6 minutes back in your day. Thank you very much for your time.
All right, thanks.